Hello, and welcome to another episode of Breaking the Guard. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about some more old war stories. This one, my debut in the Grappler's Quest Pro Divisions. This must have been 2002-ish, maybe 2003. Um, at the time, my brother and I were competing a lot in Naga because that was the first grappling tournament to come down to South Florida. And we were actually also ended up starting to promote our own Naga tournaments, or co-promote, I should say, with Kip Kohler. And as a result, we started flying around to different places, and my brother and I were doing really well, winning most of the tournaments that we're entering, whether they're absolutes or pro divisions. And our names started to get dropped in Grappling Magazine, which was a big deal for us at the time because I know at some point I was on the cover, which was pretty cool, and had a lot of features and whatnot. There was then Grappler's Quest, which was the main rival to Naga. And at the time, they were very adversarial to each other. So as a grappler, I was like pretty much doing all Naga events exclusively until I think it was 2002, if I'm thinking right, because it was the U.S. Trials qualifier. And it was implying that there was going to be some type of world, tournament. And my brother and I were invited to do the U.S. Trials by Brian Simmons, who was a creator of Grappler's Quest. And, we were excited, accepted. I was going to be in light heavyweight. My brother was going to be in lightweight. And there was a lot of great names at the time. Pablo Popovich was doing like the middleweight. And then Jeff Monson was doing heavyweight. And I recall at the time because on the forums online, I think, what was the one? It wasn't MMA.TV. There was another one, NHB Gear, which for you young guys, NHB Gear would stand for No Holds Barred Gear, right? But it was mainly a jiu-jitsu forum, even though it was called NHB. And a lot of people were talking, saying that they were completely dismissing the odds that my brother and I would win this tournament because we were both considered bottom seed. And I had called for a clean sweep from the Florida team, which, my brother, Pablo Povich, me, and Jeff Monson. That was my call. Even though I wasn't training with, Jeff or Pablo, I've actually competed against both of them, but I just knew like the Florida team is very stacked. Even though we weren't a team, I just made it as such. And we make our way, we get there, and I can remember my first match was against Todd Margolis, who's a very good wrestler, also a Lloyd Irvin black belt. I believe it was the first time we actually, encountered Lloyd Irvin because he was coaching Margolis. But I didn't know anything about, really about him other than he was like the star of Grappler's Quest, to the point that he sung the national anthem to get the event started, which I thought was weird, right? And I was like, what the hell is going on? And to me, since that was his first match, I thought he's looking past me, right? If, he can get up there and sing and have a good old time, like he's clearly not dialed in because I'm going to be giving this guy that match of a lifetime. So the tournament starts. I do believe I go up first before my brother. And I've covered this match, if you've seen on the breakdowns, there's a wrestling battle. And I was able to win this match by pure wrestling simply with takedowns. And if you watch the breakdown, I pretty much use underhooks exclusively to be able to win all the situations. And that was, again, an upset by Grappler's Quest standards, right? And I think it was like 6-0 or 4-0, something to that effect. I got a few takedowns in. And that set me up. Now, I think it was an 8-man. I'm pretty sure it was an 8-man. I know my second with Justin Bayless, I believe. And I was able to beat him as well. It's funny because when I watched the video, I'm like, man, I almost got myself taken down because he got a good clinch, and I just managed to last minute be able to throw him. And once I got him on the ground, he was in a lot of problems, and I was able to cartwheel past him, mount him, and dominate the ground positions, and ended up winning that match. On the other side, my brother was also doing really well. He had to beat several black belts as well, and uh, he did so, if I recall, without being scored on either. In fact, neither of us were scored on in this entire tournament. We were able to dominate with our wrestling and with our guard passing to come out on top. And in the finals, I had another tough match against a really good guard player from Renzo Gracie. And oh man, the name is slipping me. It's gonna come back because he was definitely a very tough customer. It took a while to be able to crack because I was trying to. He was playing a very good butterfly open guard, and every time. And back then, I was kind of spamming knee cut passes left and right, and he was just keen to it. But eventually, I was able to draw him into sitting up. And as he sat up, if you guys see my setups, I launched in, scored my pass, and that was the defining moment for me because that's the score that won. My brother on the other side also had a really tough match. I'm not sure if Alan Teo was the first or last match. It might have been the last, but it was another tough match, or I might be getting the names mixed up. But in any case, he also won with a really nice guard pass also. He had to do, guy was trying to sit up with like a shin and shin guard, if I remember correctly, and my brother spun out and then knee cut right after the spin out and scored a pass there. So we both ended up winning our divisions. And then as to my prediction, Pavel Popovich won his division and Jeff Bonson won his division. So I accurately predicted the 4 winners in advance, like weeks in advance. And I remember we had a good moment there because we all took a picture together as even though we weren't a team, we were still all Floridians. So we all had our trophies together. And probably one of the most cherished memories that I have with my brother because, it's hard when you're coming in with 2 people to win everything at a very high level, right? It's not easy. And that was one of the few times we were able to pull it off on a big stage. And it was just really cool to do that. And it was also an upset style because, like I said, nobody was counting us. We were considered massive underdogs. My brother was also like the number 8 seed and was, given one of the toughest opponents up first. And, we rolled through the competition. And that kind of set us up for all the other Grapples Quest because once we won that, we kind of got on the radar. Even though it was disappointing, there was no real world, like we qualified for the U.S. team, but there was no real, it didn't look like they had anything else set up. Maybe it fell through or whatnot. But in any case, the tournament itself was still a fun challenge that I'm glad I was able to do and do with my brother and have that memory together and the good times because that set us up later for lots of other Grappler's Quests. And in Grappler's Quest, I ended up competing a lot with Renzo Gracie guys. And it's funny because at the time, I don't think I've ever lost to a Renzo Gracie guy or team member, period. I won against all of them. And I definitely had some good scraps, though. But it was a good time. I remember one of the things that was funny was on the forums. I came back after we won, And the only thing I posted was just a GIF or a GIF, however you want to call it, of a broom just going with a clean sweep. But we got a good amount of coverage. I know we got on Grappling Magazine again for that performance. So that was fun. And I think on the other hand, it kind of highlights the difference because I was just reading about a grappling tournament that happened yesterday that I just learned about, which was a Zapatero Invitational. They did a $100,000 160 man tournament, 160 pound, I'm sorry, 160 pound man tournament. I think it was a 16 man. So 16 athletes, all 160 pounds. You had Diego Pato in there, you had Jed Thompson. There was quite a few names. You had the Corby brothers, quite a few big names in there. And I don't know if it was just not in my circle, although I would imagine since I'm doing a lot of grappling martial arts stuff that I should have seen this pop up, but I didn't see this pop up until yesterday. Or I think not yesterday, it would have been Friday, and the tournament was on Saturday. So I don't know if the promotion wasn't completely up to par, but just amazing that that type of opportunity is there. Mind you, that tournament that we were like competing for, I don't even think there was a prize. No, I think there was, but it must have been small, like $500. You know, like I don't even think it was $500 if I'm being honest, but uh, but it just goes to show you, like, man, and that would have been like 20 something years ago. So like the sport has exploded to a point now where $100,000 tournament for, you know, just somewhere in Tampa can just pop up and not be on everyone's radar. If they were offering a $10,000 tournament back in 2002, you would have had everyone all over the world who was into grappling flying there to compete. Like, it wouldn't be even a question, right? So the fact that you have a $100,000 tournament kind of fly in like under the radar and not be at the top of everybody's head is pretty amazing, right? That just goes to show how much money is being thrown at these athletes now, where that isn't as big as a deal as I think it is. And yeah, I think it's just amazing. But I also think it kind of changes a little bit the perspective of the people who participate in the sport now. And I've talked about this before, but when you come from the type of background that I did in many of the old school, like if you look at the UFC 1 fighters, for example, make no mistake, guys who fought in UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like probably up to like 100, none of them had any illusions whatsoever that they would be wealthy or famous from fighting. None. You remember the price for the early UFCs to win an 8-man or 16-man tournament, I think they changed back and forth, was $65,000. Now, this is in 1990s, so that meant a lot more than it did now, but still, you're not going to be rich, right? Like, you're not retiring off winning a UFC. You're not going to buy yourself even a BMW, right? You probably couldn't afford one. So that wasn't the reason people fought. They probably could have announced like $1,000 prize and you would still have the same people show up. The people that fought in the early days was about pride. Right? It wasn't about money. It wasn't really about fame, or they wanted to prove something. And this was a legal venue for them to prove themselves. And you have to recall, I remember early UFCs, before, the first UFC rather, before any mixed martial arts were occurring in Florida, or I mean in the US rather, no one really knew which martial arts style was the best, right? So this was kind of to prove like what I do is the best, you know, is it Taekwondo, Judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, shoot fighting, like which style is the best style? And those early UFCs were about proving that to a bigger like as far as like the background behind it. So the money wasn't really a big deal. And of course, people were also trying to prove themselves, right? Like I am the best, right? I'm the toughest guy. And some people just wanted the challenge. Like I just want to go in there and show what I'm made of. So those early fighters were more uh, incentivized by their ego than they were by prizes. And I would say that continued into the 2000s as well. I don't remember, again, it's funny because I was showing, I had Oliver come by when he was here for the UFC Fight Pass, and I was showing him early UFCs and stuff like, and I mean, he's not that much younger than me, but he had never seen any of these things, and I forget, like, it's a generational gap, right? And he thought it was so cool, and I'm like, yeah, this is like, this is where you guys came from, like, but it's kind of changed quite a bit as far as the mentality, right? Because like I was saying, like people in those early days, they didn't expect to become rich or famous or anything like that. They just wanted to fight. They enjoyed fighting. They had something to prove, and they wanted to test themselves. So we didn't have the best athletes early on. And generally, the ones that were great athletes were wrestlers because the wrestlers needed something else to do and they saw there was an opportunity there. And that's why when you had like the Kevin Randlemans, the Mark Colemans, the Mark Kerrs, a lot of Marks, right? The Matt Hughes, right? These guys were very dominant when they got in because they were superior athletes. But wrestling was just a sport that didn't monetize their athletes. So they were left with that, basically with no channel. And now the UFC, even though it didn't really bring that much money back then, it was still better than anything they could do wrestling. But grappling was pretty much very underpaid. And early 2000s, when my brother and I really started getting into MMA and jiu-jitsu, the UFC was underground. It was essentially no longer being broadcast on TV or on pay-per-view, and it was like kind of in underground style events for quite a few years. So again, you're not going to be making money if you're not being headlined or publicized, and most people didn't even know what UFC was if you asked them about it. So the type of people that were doing it were a lot more hardcore, right? They weren't incentivized by fame and fortune. So to me, this makes a better breed of fighter because the motivation is more pure. And by that, I mean you're doing the sport for the enjoyment of the sport. You're not doing the sport as a means to achieve some other goal, like I want to be famous or I want to make money, right? So I think that motivation, in my opinion at least, is a stronger one than somebody who's using the sport as an ulterior means to achieve another goal, right? Because if we move now, obviously MMA has become a lot more popular. Everybody knows, if you say UFC, everybody pretty much understands, or if I say cage fighting, people know exactly what we're talking about now. It's not a mystery. And a lot of the UFC fighters are celebrities now, right? And they're famous on their own right. So there is a viable path to fame and fortune. And compared to other sports, I still believe the barrier to entry is much less. As far as if you're a great athlete and you train hard, chances are you're going to end up in a big promotion, right? That's not the same in other sports like football and basketball, where there's been like decades of athletes getting in, and you need certain connections and qualifications and skills that you can't just brute force your way in. Like you really need to have a good mix of the work ethic, genetics, and everything else. In mixed martial arts, I don't think that barrier is quite as high yet. I'm sure at some point it will be very saturated and hard to get in, but I don't think it is now. Although I will say having the right connections is still a huge part of it, right? You need to know the right people to be able to get into big promotions because there are gatekeepers that keep people back. But in grappling, that's almost non-existent, right? I think anybody who is a really good athlete and trains hard and whatnot can easily jump in and to get into world-class competition. So there is a lot of opportunity in grappling to be able to shoot up to the top. Now, obviously, the pay is not as great, but it's respectable now, right? Last year we had two grapplers make $1 million, right? You had Nicky Rod, and you had one of the brothers, Cade Rotolo, win the $1 million. So like, that's pretty damn good. It's not bad, right? And that's not counting their sponsorship and other things that they're making. So like, there is really good paths to making money. And I think one of the unique advantages of grappling compared to other sports is that grappling has a lot of people who invest in grappling as far as for their own training, right? Like the instructional market is something that only really exists in martial arts and particularly in grappling, right? There Taekwondo instructionals and boxing? Yes, but they don't sell nearly as much. And for whatever reason, well, I think the reason is because grappling is the most complicated of all the sports. I don't think that's up for debate. I've made that case many times. I'm not going to go into it again. It's just, if you disagree with me, write me a comment or email and I can get into it again. But there's just so many emotions that it's a lot more complicated. So having a technical gap is a common issue. And instructionals can address that, especially nowadays, how easy it is to access instructionals. You don't need a VHS player and your tube TV and sit down and have to rewind and play again. Like the digitization of all this information has made it so easy that we can just watch everything from our phone while we're on the mats and then get to practicing right away. So this has given the athletes another avenue of revenue, which if you look at someone like Gordon Ryan, he posts his numbers pretty frequently and he's pulling in a few $100,000 a month just in instructional courses. So clearly he's making more money, or at least it appears that he's making more money on instructionals than he does competing, especially now since he's been competing only like once a year. So there are more paths to not only like income, but like passive income for these athletes. So there's a lot more incentive to just be in it for the money versus in it for the game, right? And I guess what I'm trying to say, I feel like the old school guys were all in it for the game. We were in there to fight. I once was supposed to fight somebody in a rematch for my second, or not my second, but it would have been like my third or fourth shoot fight, fourth. And it was a rematch against Efren Ruiz, who was my first shoot fight that he beat me in overtime. And I wanted to get that one back. But when I got to the event, it turned out he got hurt or something. He didn't show up. So I was left without a match. But there was also somebody who didn't get a match and they were looking to partner him up. But there was a big problem. He was like 300 something pounds and I was 190. And I, without hesitation, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And they're like, and I remember he even came up to me. And the gentleman I'm talking about is Wade Rome, really nice guy. And he was like, are you sure? Like, I gotta weigh you by over like 100 pounds or something. I was like, man, I've fought guys bigger than you. And I'm not sure if he was 300 pounds. He must have been close, maybe 280, right? But he was a big boy. And at the time, I remember I was training so much kickboxing and Muay Thai, and I was trying to model my fight style to be like Marco Ruas, right? Which, if you guys know, he is the one that famously chopped down Paul Varelans in an early UFC, and Paul Varelans was a monster of a guy, and Marco Ruas is probably about my frame, a little taller maybe, and just chopped him down until the guy couldn't stand, right? And I went into this fight thinking I'm going to do this same strategy. But like, again, no pay for this. In fact, I paid to enter this event, right? So I think it was like $50 or whatever to be able to compete. So again, very different mentality, right? I went in because I just wanted to fight. Right? I didn't particularly care who it was. I just wanted to fight. And that was a fun match. I ended up losing that one on decision. I kept trying to kick this guy down, but man, it was a big tree. And Wade, I believe, was a D1 wrestler, so he wasn't standing around eating too many kicks. Right? Like he started rushing in for takedowns, and I was too striking centric, So every time I was trying to kick him, I would score a couple shots, but then I would get taken down, and then I would get back up, and then get taken down. I didn't have enough circling, and I think it was just a more difficult game plan. In this aspect in the shoot fighting, there was no headshots, which really minimizes the danger level of like rushing somebody also. So like, if I could have kicked to the head or punched to the head, it would change things significantly as far as like how easy it is to approach. But I remember I was body punching him a few times, and it felt like I was punching the kingpin. I could hit a decent sized power gut. So when I would just punch it, it felt my hand just like sink in there. I'm like, oh, this is not doing any damage. The only thing I think I was doing damage was the leg kicks maybe, but that was it. But in any case, that's just to highlight the differences in mentality, right? Like, I don't think nowadays you would have people up to accept that type of offer. Like, oh yeah, last minute opponent change, you're fighting a 300-pound guy and you're not making any money doing it. I don't think anybody's accepting that now, right? And I don't think they should. But I'm just saying it does change the type of person that you have. And I think personally, the mindset of somebody who's in the game for the love of the game versus in the game for the love of money or fame is different. And I think I think it's better to love what you're doing. Not to say that you can't have a mix of the things. Like if I was competing nowadays, I wouldn't be doing free events either. Let's be honest. Like no, like I can get paid. I'm gonna go after the money, right? But at the end of the day, the main motivation for it is the game, right? The money is a bonus. If I was truly after making as much money as possible, I would have never gotten into martial arts because that's a silly sport. I would have gotten into football or something like that, which my mom begged me many times, even though I don't think I have enough size for that. But that would have made more sense. There was a bigger avenue towards making a fortune in, some of the bigger sports, especially in that era, right? So, or I could have just been, a lawyer or a doctor and get, a pretty guaranteed base income that would be higher than that I would have had as an early martial artist. So that definitely wasn't the motivation, right? But it definitely helps when you're competing. If I can get paid, that's going to make it easier for me to be able to train better or get access to better resources. So I'm not saying to ignore, like you have to ignore the incentive of money. Like no, it's there for a reason and it's going to help you get access to better resources, but it shouldn't be why you're doing it, in my opinion. Anyhow, that's all I have for you guys for today, and I'll see you all next week.